The views on the following program are not necessarily those of WPSL. However, we do encourage you to like and share them on social media with all your friends and neighbors to find out what's going on and who's going on all around the Treasure Coast. It's the Sue Ellen Sanders Show. So here's your host, without any further ado, the one and only Sue Ellen Sanders.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, and good day. It's Sue Ellen Sanders. We're doing the show again by Zoom just because things are happening and cooking, and we're happy to have our guest. She had a little bit of technical difficulties this morning, so she's joining us by audio, but we have this lovely picture of Lesley George that is up on the screen here. So you can see what she looks like. She just is not as animated as I know she usually is. Can you just make the little picture's mouth move?
Hey, me and you will be millionaires for that, right?
Yeah. I saw something the other day advertised on Instagram. God, the ads on Instagram get me every single time. And it's a thing where you can color your old portraits, but you can also animate them.
Wow.
So is that, I didn't click on it yet because I don't know how they possibly could do that. But it looked pretty cool on the ad. So, and this kind of leads us a little bit into what we're talking about today. And today's world, you hear a lot of things, you read a lot of things, you see stuff on social media and on TV, and sometimes you just don't always know what to believe. Lesley George is my guest today, and her website is Mosaic Inc. We'll talk a little bit about that too, but we're also going to talk about the importance of diversity and inclusion and how to incorporate it in our everyday life at work. Now, here's the thing about diversity and inclusion it means something different to everybody. And everybody has a different view where a pair of glasses, or maybe several pair of glasses, where they're seeing the world through that eye. And so diversity and inclusion means something different to everybody, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, let's talk about what you're doing now and how you got there, and what some of the things that you've done recently. First of all, you've really weathered the storm, the COVID storm that is, and you had several different projects that you were working on, and they've kind of culminated in Mosaic. Tell us about what that is.
Awesome. First of all, Sue Ellen, thank you so much for having me on your show. And the conversation of DE&I engagement and belonging is something that is just so near and dear to my heart. And what I love when you first started is you mentioned it about everyday life. A lot of people think that we just need to leave it in the closet at work, but it is something we need to incorporate in our everyday life. So just real quick, let me just introduce myself. So I'm an award-winning author, TV host, and I coach professional women over the age of 30, helping them getting out of their own way, positioning their uniqueness as their secret sauce, right? And so I want to stay there when we talk about uniqueness, because whenever I talk about diversity, for me, it's always how do each and every one of us show up in the world. I believe that every single person, and I specialize in women because those are the women that I coach and I do book projects with and events with. But in terms of women, we are all uniquely the same. A lot of people would hear that and they would wonder, well, what does that mean? What that means is that I don't believe that we are a melting pot. I believe that each and every one of us have our own special sauce, maybe a little tangy, a little bit hot or whatever, but each one of us have our own secret sauce, our own special sauce, just like our blueprint and our fingerprints are all different. And so I help women be able to show up in that way. So as we talk about diversity, you mentioned, it could mean different for everyone, but I'm just going to take a diversity, I'm going to take it from the dictionary. So diversity is a range of human differences, including but not limited to race, ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation, class, physical or mental ability and attributes, religious or ethical value systems, national origin, immigration status, language, learning styles, and family structure. Inclusion is involvement and empowerment where the inherent worth and dignity of all people are recognized. An inclusive classroom promotes and nurtures a sense of belonging. It values and practices respects for the talents, beliefs, background, and ways of living of its students. And so that's why inclusion is so important as well, because diversity is celebrating everyone, but now when we move to inclusion, we're saying that everyone's involvement matters. And here's the thing, now we don't have to agree with everyone, right? But one of the main things is us getting to a point where we can respect other people's opinion. My company, Mosaic, you mentioned, and whenever you will think of a mosaic tile, that was the reason to choose the name of the company.
I
Because when
love that. Love that.
Thank you. Because when you think of a mosaic tile on itself shows up as different colors, different textures, different sizes. You have so many different things that's happening with this mosaic tile. And what happens is all these things that were different comes together to form this amazing masterpiece, whether it's a tile or whether it's an artwork, but all of these things come together to form that. And that's how I see us. We are all beautiful on our own, but when we come together, what do we form? We form this amazing human race. So that's just my take on when we talk about diversity and inclusion.
Well, and you mentioned also talking about diversity and inclusion, that sometimes the things that set us apart are not something that you can tell in appearance. They're not something that may be obvious to anybody looking. And you talked about the classroom, but every day we are a part of a classroom, whether we're in school or whether we're at work or whether we're at home or in a meeting or walking through Walmart. We're somewhere where we're constantly seeing other people, dealing with other people, learning from other people, or teaching other people.
That's a great point when you brought up in terms of I've been talking about intersectionalities recently. So in terms of intersectionalities, me as a Black woman, any Black person in America, when we walk into a room, you do know that we are Black. However, there's other parts to that person, just for anyone. So when I show up in a room, you may see a Black woman, but for me, I identify as a West Indian Black woman. I identify as a West Indian cis Black woman. So there's so much intersectionalities of all of us. And I think a lot of times we don't really get down to, okay, so what are the other parts? And I think the reason why for me, I emphasize on women, because obviously I'm a woman, but as women, I know that we have so many layers to us, and just by being a woman, right? So when I say layers, we're a mom, we're a wife, we're a girlfriend, we're an aunt, we're a sister, we're an employee, we're the caretaker. just name it. We're all of that, right? So just woman to me equals so many different layers. So now we add our special sauce on that for however you show up in the world. It just makes it so beautiful. So I'm glad that you brought that part up.
Lesley, does our special sauce change over the years depending on, where we are at any moment in life, or does it stay the same? Is it something that you develop or notice in yourself and then, it goes all the way through?
Great question. I love that. So here's what I believe about that special sauce for women. As we go through different decades in our lives, based on the roles that we're playing, we can kind of hide, we can mute ourselves, right? And so our special sauce, we may not be dripping it on everything. We may just only maybe drip it on one thing because we have all these other roles to play.
Mhm.
But I find that there's times that we go through in our lives that we realize, wait, hold on a second. I'm not showing up 100% fully authentic as myself. And what happened to that person that was in college? What happened to that 20-year-old, the 30-year-old that had all this zest for life? What happened to that person? That person does not go away. What happens is that person kind of their light kind of dims based on life. Like, I know for myself personally, where I worked before, I could not show up fully as myself. And when I say that, I have so many different pictures online right now. Over the last year, I've changed my hair color maybe 7-8 times. Well, let me go back to when I was 13. When I was 13, I was using Kool-Aid and dyeing my hair. So that person didn't go away. Somehow she got muted because I felt that in the world that I was walking in the corporate spaces that I worked in, I felt like I could not show up that way. And so that happens to a lot of women where you feel you cannot show up that way. It's just that she just gets buried, right? But she's still there. So last year I decided to cut my hair. I went blonde and everybody kept on saying, well, what does your husband think? And I'm thinking, why does it matter? What does he think? It's not his hair, right? And so after having those conversations over and over and over with women, that really solidified my thinking of we don't disappear, your light dims, therefore you cannot show up in all your intersectionalities, in all your diversity, in all of that. You can't because of the different roles that we're playing. So that was a great question. Thank you so much for that.
Well, you see it too, even when you're not showing up as authentically your whole everything, Kool-Aid and not, which by the way, I had no idea you could dye your hair with Kool-Aid. That is a very cool little trivia tip. But there are times, and ideally you're going to be your true authentic self with every audience, with every person you're with. But maybe if you're with your husband and you're meeting his coworkers for the first time, maybe you wouldn't have let as much of your true authentic self out as you would with family members or with people that you've known for 20 years. So maybe it's not that you're not being true. Maybe you're being, dare I say it, smart or strategic.
So I love that question. And so for me, my battle was I was doing different things. And let me start with something as simple as a nose ring. So I worked at a law firm and I would take out my nose ring every Monday going to work and show up Monday without the nose ring all week during the week and then wear it on the weekends. I had a boss that said to me, so when are you finally going to wear that nose ring to work? And I said, well, she says, I see that hole in your nose. And that to me was one of my first lessons, right? So I always believe how you do one thing is how you do everything. So in terms of your husband's coworkers, the way you show up is the way that you show up. Because if we have to remember, just like me, I had to remember to make sure that I took the nose ring out on Sunday or early Monday morning before I went to work. And to be honest with you, that was very tiring.
Yeah.
So how many of us are taking out something, not putting on something because of who we're going to meet or who we're going to interact with? And that's very interesting, because it brings me to something that we call code switching. Code switching is where usually minorities may switch the way that they speak depending on who they're around. The accents may change. For me, I have an accent. I'm from the Caribbean. So that could lead to something called code switching, which for me, that's a lot of work. It can be very tiring. So whoever you are, when you meet your husband's coworkers, that's who should show up. In the nose ring with the pink hair. And if you wear a suit, you could wear a suit with the nose ring and the pink hair. Or if you don't wear a suit and you feel comfortable in a suit and some sneakers, show up as who you are, because it takes more for you to hide your true personality or who you are. And don't get me wrong. So when I talk about no, I think it's the same way, because my church, I remember hearing my pastor saying one time that we accept you as who you are, meaning you could walk into church in some shorts, and that's how people should see you. Now, don't get me wrong, they may have some people that's gonna maybe say something, and that all that goes back to cultural norms for them. But if for the person, they're looking to improve their faith, and their walk with God, and they're showing up in some jeans, oh well, or some shorts, oh well. So I think that's like I said, that's why I love working with women, because for me, I realize how important it is to express yourself the way that you do. When I first started coloring my hair, I mean, from men to women. Just yesterday, I got a compliment from a man. Oh, I just love your hair, because I think my hair is pink now. It was purple like 3 weeks ago.
And all we've got is this picture in front of us. I'm gonna have to get my crayon out. Or my Kool-Aid.
So it takes less work to show up in your full self. So that to me is you embracing your diversity, and you now saying that whatever space that you walk in, this is who I am, and I other people just need to include you. And then that now spans, I think, the whole diversity, inclusion, belonging, engagement spectrum.
Okay. So when somebody comes to you and they're looking for coaching or for your approval, and they explain to you that they're different people depending on the audience that they're dealing with at the time, do you is it all or none, or is it something that's gradual?
Oh yeah, no, that's gradual. I mean, it takes somebody comes to me, that's a gradual. First of all, we got to go through an assessment to determine what are some blockers for you. What is really holding you back? So what are some of your saboteurs? What are some of those things what are some of that limiting beliefs or that limiting narrative that you have going on in your head, where you feel that you cannot show up as yourself, right? So that's usually the first part. And then now we just start working through that to get you to where you need to get to. It's all about the client. It's all about the woman. It's not about me. This is how I show up in the world. And usually the women that are gravitated towards me are the women that are looking to do that. So if you're looking to show up in the world as yourself, as expressive as you are, that's usually the women that I coach. But that's a process. That definitely is a process.
Well, so if everybody showed up at whatever office it was or whatever organization as their own true authentic self, wouldn't you have everybody going into all different directions? How would people be able to come together on a common project?
That's a great question. So here's the thing, right? So just because you have different people showing up as who they are, that doesn't mean that you can't have different voices and different opinions. And that's the wonderful thing about now when we're talking about inclusion, is because now you're listening to all the different voices and all the different opinions. So that's the wonderful thing. So everybody shows up. I'm thinking in my head, I'm thinking like in a Google office, right? Google or one of those tech offices out there in California, where they come up with these amazing, expansive ideas that have revolutionized the way that we do things, right? And it's because it's basically where first of all, you have to create that type of brave space where people know and understand that their opinions will be listened to. That's first of all. So that's all about a culture, right? So it's not, that's creating that type of culture, whether it's in your workplace, whether it's at home. So it's basically, let's start from creating that culture where everyone knows that they are a part of the team and they play a certain part of the team, and everybody's views will be listened to.
Well,
So yeah, that's a great question.
I know that you've had experience bringing everybody to the table, and that the importance of that, whether it's in your personal life or in your work life. But for example, if you have a board of directors in an organization or a management team and there are no women present, or there's no Black men present, or there's no Generation Z or X or baby boomers present, will that change the operation of the organization?
So that's a great question, and here's the thing, right? From the organization level, not everybody is going to embrace this idea, and that's okay. So it's not a one size fit all, something that everybody has to embrace. First of all, what is the goal? Is the goal of the organization or the nonprofit, whatever it is your goal to now be inclusive? If that's your goal, okay, so now we need to start looking at some practices. So we need to, whether it's a board of directors, we need to look at and be intentional about, okay, what is the makeup of our board? First of all, what is the makeup of our community? And then how is our community being reflective on our board? Who are the people that we serve? What does that look like? If we are serving the Latinx community, and in these conversations, we don't have anyone from the Latinx community, that's a problem. So if we are serving in the African American community, and let me just even take it down a step further from the African or the Black, let me just say Black community, because right now the language in the spaces now when we're talking about D&I is they are very specific. It's either Black or it's white, it's Latinx. So it's not necessarily African American, because African American.
African American, do they call people white Americans? I mean, American is American, right?
Not necessarily, because I mean, I consider myself West Indian American because my dad is from Mississippi and my mother's from the Caribbean. So I consider myself West Indian American. That would be the first thing that I would say first, right?
Right.
So,
but my point was the expression Black American to me has always been problematic because you don't identify somebody as an American with a color attached to it, because then you would have red Americans and yellow Americans and pink Kool-Aid hair Americans.
Well, like I said, I think now the language is just more Black. It's not necessarily Black Americans. It's the language is Black, it's white, it's so it's just Black.
Okay.
So when we're saying, as we're talking about representation, because representation does matter. So as we're
Right.
talking about representation, and you say Black, it can now even go down and say Black, someone Black that's from the Caribbean, where someone Black from Africa, where their cultural norms are very different, but we may share the same race, right? So it depends on, I believe that it's important for who you're serving. First of all, what is the goal of the organization? Is that something that the organization wants to embrace? Like I said, you don't have to. But if that's something that the organization wants to embrace, who are the people that you serve? And now you're looking around, and do you see representation? And if you are serving a certain population, and you're not, and it's not being represented, I think there's a problem. Even we can even delineate it down, and let's go to income. So if you are serving a low income, low to moderate income, and you don't have anyone at the board meetings that are part of that income level that can speak to some issues that you may bring up, that's a problem, because we're not coming from lived experiences. There's gonna be decisions made that's not coming from lived experience. Let me just take it down to a situation in Miami. So I was at a conference. This is pre-COVID, and what I learned is we even have subcultures when we talk about financing. So you have bank institutions and so forth. They're talking about depositing money and getting credit and mortgages and so forth. Where down in Miami, there's a subculture that all they deal with is cash. So now you're speaking a language that subculture does not even understand, because they strictly deal in cash. Why? Because they may be a mixture of people coming from different countries, and the country culture that they came from, they just believe strictly in cash. So what happens is that some of the banks have to now kind of shift their models so that they can be able to now capture the cash money for those people that strictly deal in cash, and now start to add in different policies and procedures for that. That's what I'm talking about when I'm saying that it is important what the goal is. It's important who you're trying to serve, because if you're trying to serve a population and there's no representation, so that the people around the table have no clue what that culture is dealing with. And when I say culture has nothing to do with race or ethnic background. Culture is culture. Just like I brought up the
Right.
money culture, right?
Right.
So if people around the table don't understand the culture in which they're attempting to do good, I believe you're doing more harm than anything else, because you don't understand what that culture is going through.
All right. So beyond the people sitting at the table or in your office or in any type of situation or in a classroom, there are many other ways that people view life models on social media, on TV and movies, what they perceive, what they see all the time in the news. And how does diversity and inclusion and equality play a role in what has changed over the last 10 years?
So back to what I said, representation matters. And for me, so let me go back to, I was raised in Connecticut, in Bridgeport, Connecticut. And I remember as a little girl going to middle school and even elementary school. There was nobody on TV that looked anywhere near how I looked. And when I say that, the reason why I say that, I'm speaking of being very specific, a dark-skinned Black woman. right? So there's nobody that I saw that I could align with. So let's fast forward and let's go to, there was a show that came out, How to Get Away with Murder. And that character, I 100% identified. Why? Because I saw myself in that character, right? I saw myself on TV. I saw myself in a role
The
because
professor, the
yes,
law
yeah,
professor, yeah.
yes. So I saw myself um, being represented. So representation does matter, especially for children, because if you don't identify and see yourself on TV, which is, and now, young people now, they have social media. But that's why there's a lot of companies now that are throwing money at, a lot of different organizations so that they can have that presence on social media, because that does matter, because it is important for our youth as they are growing up. It's no good telling a child that you can be whatever you want to be, you're saying that, but at the same time, for the visual learners, which myself, I'm a visual learner, I don't see it. So you may say it all day long, but I don't see it. And that
Mhm.
part is important. So especially in the media, we've said over a period of time that there's some negative things that's on the media, but I think the commercials are so much better now, because I see everything through a very diverse lens. So I pay attention when I see the commercials now. A lot of the cereal commercials have multiracial people around the breakfast table. You see a lot of companies really spending money and being very intentional of what they're putting out there. So I would say that post George Floyd, because I think that's a significant mark in our country. Prior to George Floyd, not that there were not issues, but I think that the doors that many people were trying to knock at was not getting any type of attention. And I believe because of the combination of COVID and everybody was locked up, and so post George Floyd, a lot of companies have spent a lot of money to really move the narrative of representation matter.
But that intentionality wasn't always purposeful. It wasn't always that they did it themselves. Sometimes some of the companies and some of the social media and some of the largest brands with advertising were kind of, their hand was forced, and maybe they wouldn't have done it. I remember back from an early day in advertising and PR, when we were creating graphics, there were different libraries of art to pull from, and you could not find multicultural faces in that art. The stuff that was free, unless you paid extra to go into a very specific art. So to use a simple flyer, a website, something that was an everyday use, social media, an ad, a drawing, you had to pay extra to be able to get diversity in your art. And that wasn't that long ago.
Definitely, because I was going to tell you, I could probably go back 3 years ago. And because I do a lot of stuff for my church when it comes to graphics and so forth. And so you are 100% correct. And it was not that long ago.
Mhm.
It was probably, let's go back 3-4 years ago, that I could not find anything that was multiracial. So you are absolutely correct. And so that's why I say that it's post George Floyd, because that really gave everyone awakening as to what has been happening in this country. It's not something that just started, but everyone, and like I said, I admire the companies that are putting money behind what they're, not just saying it, but they're actually doing it. So
Right.
I admire those companies.
Right. And, I don't want to focus, as you pointed out early on in the show, that diversity is a whole lot more than the color of your skin. it is a whole lot of commonalities or things that are different about us all. And but as an older white woman who grew up in Miami, there were a lot of experiences that I had in the 60s that are so completely different than the experiences that, like, if you went to Miami now, what you would see is completely different than the Miami that I grew up in. Same thing for, other groups, like other schools at college, in law school and med school. The barriers that are being broken down, not just based on the color of your skin, but on your sex and on how you identify yourself, are changing every day, but not necessarily changing as quickly as they might have.
That's a great point, because when we first talk about diversity, women are part of that group as well. So for some things may not have changed as quickly as we would like, for some others, but like I said, I do think that we are getting to a point where at least we can have the conversation. And that's really part of my mission, is to be able to have these conversations on diversity, inclusion, engagement, belonging, equity, to have these conversations and it be conversations where people are comfortable having these conversations. Because let's face it, still this day, we're in 2022, some people don't want to have these type of conversations. So when we can come together as a community, and we have different voices around the table, just sharing lived experiences, it's absolutely amazing just to share lived experiences, share family cultures, share what is diverse about your family. You can have a family that's all white, and in that all white, there's still diversity in that. So for us to really come to a point where we can have these type of conversations more and more, and where we are not pointing the finger, because I don't believe pointing the finger really gets us any type of solution. All pointing the finger is going to do is have people retreat back to their corner, and everyone's saying whatever they want to say. So my vision, my hope for us as a nation, as humanity, is for us to be able to have conversations like these, and for us to be able to express family cultures, different neighborhood cultures, religious, ethnic cultures, all of that, and just be able to hear one another from lived experiences. Because I think that's just the beauty. And then now, as we are doing that and become a lot more comfortable doing that, we're just now given permission for other generations to unlock that. Because as we do that, where our children are going to hear us, then it's going to trickle down to their children. And now what are we doing now? We're changing a whole culture in our country as we talk about diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging.
We are changing a whole culture in our community. And that's why, and I swear to goodness, I'm not trying to point fingers here, and certainly not at you, but this is one of the reasons, as somebody who taught high school English for 6 years in the middle of my public relations career, why I am aghast at the idea of changing history and only teaching our children in school things that won't make them feel uncomfortable, or banning books that people have written about the Holocaust or about slavery or about any other time in history, talking about something that might make, especially at the high school level, our kids uncomfortable. Because that is one of the sure ways to make children pay attention. And again, when I say children, I'm talking about high school and college age kids, to be able to understand what other people have gone through. That this whole thing with banning books and picking and choosing what we teach in our classroom is just flabbergasts me. It's just, it is amazing that anybody would want to do that, because I so thought that everybody was moving in the right direction at one point. And we were educating our children, and they were looking at other cultures, and they were looking at other people's experiences, and they were understanding it, and it was meaningful. And now what I see is a group of people that are trying to take us back to a time before that, and I'm disappointed.
And I definitely understand what you're saying. Here's the thing, when it comes to banning media, censoring media, I want to say that it's certain words, certain obscene words that were being used. I'm not going to use that word here in the radio, but
Please don't. Yes.
it is certain words that's being used, which I don't feel, this is my personal opinion, I don't feel that a group of people should be reduced to a word like that in history books. So I think that that's part of it. I don't think you can ever ban books on slavery. I don't think, because that, slavery was not just in America. Slavery was an economic system that a lot of different people use, right? So I don't think it's about erasing slavery, because as we know, obviously when slaves came to the Caribbean and came here, they were doing a whole lot of other things before, when they came here, that they were slaves. So I think the banning of certain books would be of language, certain words that's being used. And so my personal opinion is, I think that's, certain words should need to be taken out. So whether you change the word or however, but history is history, and which we know that this country, the foundation of this country, slavery is a part of that.
Well, but it's not just the books on slavery. It's, books on, for example, World War II and Nazi Germany, and specifically the graphic novels like Mouse, that I used to teach kids in 11th grade. And there are no curse words in that. It's not word choice. It was the fact that the purpose of using that literature is to make people uncomfortable. It's a deliberate, make people uncomfortable, because the best way to not repeat history is to learn it and to understand it. So I don't know. I don't mean to just go off on a tangent. I feel like if we are trying to expand culturally and diversely, what we are seeing in our life, that what we read about and what we teach and what we learn should be also multicultural.
I definitely agree. Like I said, my stance is on the language. So I've never read the book Mouse, but for me, it's going to be about the language.
Yeah, it's about a survivor of the concentration camps, but it's written in a graphic novel form, and it's written by the son of a Holocaust survivor, and he uses allegory to turn the story, and it's about cats. The drawings are cats and mice, but it's something that it's one of those things that have been in recent months banned, And I don't know. It's not just that, it's just the lessons that the teachers use to teach should also, I feel strongly that it shouldn't all be just about one culture. It shouldn't be about one person's experience. There was a time when I was in school where every book I read that was at a higher level literature was written by an old white man. No women's authors. We weren't reading women's authors. We weren't reading multicultural authors. It was just Shakespeare and Edgar Allan Poe and many others that sure, that was a part of who we were, but that's certainly not representative of everybody in society. So
Right.
all right. Well, I don't want to go off too much on a tangent with that. What would you say to people who wanted to, whether, at different stages in your life, if you wanted to celebrate diversity and inclusion, what are some of the ways that you could do that in your everyday life?
That's a great question. So, what I would say is, and they say that Sundays in America is one of the most divided time in this country because everybody is going to a different church or whatever different religion. I would say, as we're talking about being intentional, that's a very I'm a very intentional, very deliberate person in a lot of things that I do. So I would say to uh, try and maybe meet someone that doesn't look like you, or maybe they don't have the same accent you do, or they may be not be from the same state that you are. Because I've always said that instead of assuming how to celebrate something, ask the people. I'll just give you a quick example. So I'm from Antigua in the Caribbean. And when I tell people, and people say, "Where are you from?" and I say, "I'm from Antigua," the most people will go on a tangent and they're gonna compare it to Jamaica. In the Caribbean, all of the islands are different. We may have an overarching similar uh, foods because we have the same maybe the same plants and so forth, but we eat different things. And so when someone is saying they're from Antigua, which Antigua is a very small island, can fit into Jamaica probably 800 times.
Wow.
Oh yeah, Jamaica is huge. Antigua
Yeah.
is a dot.
Okay.
So right away you're not listening, and you've already just gone ahead and just lumped two different cultures together. So I would say, before one just jumps in and says, "I want to celebrate X," how about maybe having a conversation with somebody from X? Because for me and a lot of West Indians, when they see a restaurant that says Caribbean restaurant, right? It says Caribbean restaurant, but it has a Jamaican flag. So like, because why? Because that's a marketing thing. Because most people know that when most people here in the States think of Caribbean, they think of Jamaica. There's so many other islands. So that's just a real small example that I can tell you from my cultural experience of when it comes to celebrating and you want to be inclusive. Have a conversation with how people would want to celebrate certain things, and make it something intentional. Make it something intentional where your family is maybe doing some research on what they would want to celebrate, or how they're going to celebrate, what days, or what month, what is carnival. Even that word carnival for people in the Caribbean looks different than what most Americans call carnival. Most Americans, a carnival is like a fair, in which for us, that's not a carnival. So there's so many different things that that we can take for granted, different words that we may use, we can take for granted that, you can just have a conversation with someone that you may be interested in from wherever they're from.
I think that So if you're in a position like you said Sunday, or you can go to a friend's church, or you can hang out with somebody who's different than you. Um, what about watching media or having friends on social media, or deliberately joining organizations where people don't all look just like you and act just like you and talk just like you?
Um, I, I've never done that. So that part, I don't know how authentic, how real that is.
Because it's
But
the
when,
other extreme, right? It's like,
right. Yeah. So
yeah,
I've never done that. Fortunately, I think because of, my background, like I said, my dad is from Mississippi. I was born in the Caribbean. I've lived all over the world. I've lived in other countries. I've spoken different languages. So for me, that's just a lens that I see the world. I attract women and men. I have friends in every aspect throughout the LGBT community, whether it's a transgender, gay, or non-binary, right? So for me, that's just something that I have attracted. I'm very fortunate to have a list of friends, and when I say friends, not just associates, but friends that just make up a very diverse world. So to be a part of a group, if the group is intentional and the sharing is authentic, and people can show up and maybe speak to certain things and help educate. This is the one thing I want to drop in here. So for any of white women that are listening, because men won't do this, do not approach a Black woman and say, I want to touch your hair. So that's like example number
okay,
one,
okay,
right? So that's first example, because that's like an insult, right? So
okay. Lesley, I appreciate that, and that's really good information to remember. And there are a lot of things like that that we can talk about as well. But we're winding down the radio show, so we're going to have you come back and talk some more. You're listening to the WPSL Sue Ellen Sanders radio show. We got to go now. Lesley George has been my guest, and she is with Mosaic, and you can reach her on her website. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.